She laughed. He laughed at the gift he received, laughed at the gesture, laughed like someone who doesn't feel anything. But it stopped. He stopped the moment he read the name on the card. Because on that folded paper, a truth was buried that she wasn't ready to discover. Some gifts were not made to please. They were made to reveal. And what started as another ordinary Christmas turned into an emotional avalanche, the kind that exposes wounds, digs up secrets, and forces an entire family to look into the eyes of what they avoided for years. How to react when the name written on the card? Is it from someone who should be dead? Or worse, someone who never knew he was part of your story? This is not a story about blood ties. It's about invisible ties. Those that time tried to erase, but fate insisted on sewing back. What you're about to see is an intimate, silent, and overwhelming journey, where a simple exchange of gifts turns into a truth that is impossible to ignore. A true story, raw and transformative, because sometimes the biggest revelation comes not with a shout, but with a folded card and a name that changes everything. The morning of December 24th had begun like any other in this quiet suburb in the English countryside, where houses had white picket fences and gardens so manicured they looked like they were hand-painted. The atmosphere was mild. The neighbors smiled and wished Merry Christmas with an almost rehearsed spontaneity. There was no tension in the air, no harbinger that seemingly trivial day carried an invisible thread that would unite old grievances with a gesture as small as it was powerful. Jake woke up early, as he always did, even on holidays. He had this strange habit of taking advantage of the silence of the early hours to think about everything he would like to say and never said. That morning, however, he was thinking about only one thing: the present. He was not good with commemorative dates, much less with gifts. But that year, something changed. Maybe it was the uncomfortable silence of the last family gatherings, or maybe the way his sister-in-law, Rachel, always seemed to laugh at the things he did. It was a subtle laugh, disguised as a joke, but it hurt like a razor. And although everyone was amused, Jake felt that, deep down, there was a hidden contempt there. So she decided to do something different that Christmas. Not to provoke, but to show that he also knew how to observe and feel. For weeks, he discreetly observed her tastes. He saw when she praised that rare book in a dinner conversation. He noticed her glances at the window of an antique store in the center of the city. He heard the comments that no one else seemed to pay attention to. And little by little, he put together a plan. Not a plan of revenge, nor a theater of kindness. It was, in essence, an attempt at rapprochement. Maybe even an unspoken apology for all the moments he was absent, harsh, or simply invisible to that family. On December 22nd, he entered that small store, hidden between a bakery and a flower shop. The bell rang over his head, and the smell of aged wood and old pages filled the air. The owner of the place, a white-haired man with a patient smile, helped him find the perfect item, a limited edition of the book Rachel loved so much. Jake hesitated for a moment, looked at the price, bit his lips, but decided to take it anyway. It was more than a gift. It was an attempt to be seen with different eyes. Back home, she wrapped the gift carefully. He used gold paper, red ribbon, and handwritten the card. But he did not put his name in the sender. Instead, she named someone Rachel would never expect. Someone who meant a lot to her. A name that, just by being read, would make her heart stop for a second. And then, Jake put the package in his backpack, determined to deliver it at supper, without fanfare, without speeches, just with a steady, silent look. On Christmas Eve, the house was full. Laughter, smell of roasting turkey, kids running around in Santa hats. Jake stayed on the sidelines, as always, sitting in the corner of the couch, watching, waiting for the right moment. When the gifts began to be distributed, he stood up and discreetly placed the bundle among the others, as if it had always been there. No one noticed. No one ever noticed Jake. And in a way, that was comforting. It allowed him to observe the world without being noticed. But that night, everything would change. Rachel took the gift. He laughed at the flashy paper, made a sarcastic comment about the good taste of those who wrapped it. The others laughed with her, as usual, and then she started tearing up the paper. His eyes sparkled for a moment when he saw the book. But soon after, something happened. His fingers touched the card. She read the name, and it froze. The smile disappeared, the face turned pale, and the room, previously noisy, seemed to fall silent little by little, as if something invisible had pulled the air from the room. Nobody understood anything, but Jake knew. She knew that, at that very moment, something inside her had broken, or if cured. And there, standing in the corner, his hands in his pockets and his heart racing, Jake didn't say a word. He just noted. Because sometimes, what else we mean doesn't need sound. And what else we want to show fits in a simple gesture. But everything that happened after that, he could never have predicted. Because that night, which began like any other, was about to reveal buried truths and open doors that no one had the courage to touch for years. The name Rachel saw on the card was not Jake's. It was not from any of the family members present. It was the name of her father, who died 6 years ago, with whom she had not spoken since last Christmas together. John, the man she swore never to mention again. The handwriting on the card was identical to his, firm, elongated, almost artistic. And for a moment, Rachel thought she was the victim of some bad joke. But when he looked up, searching the faces around him for any clue as to who had done it, all he found was normality. As if no one knew. As if the universe had, in fact, played a trick or sent a message. She held the book to her chest. The same title that her father read to her as a child, sitting on the edge of the bed with a voice that trembled between tiredness and affection. It was a book that, since her death, she had avoided even looking at. That example was a rare version, identical to the one she lost when she moved to another city. And now he was there, in your hands, with his father's name. On Christmas Eve, the air thickened, the eyes burned, and the throat closed in a knot that no words could undo. Rachel got up and went to the hallway, as if trying to escape from what is already inside her. Jake followed her silently. He didn't know what to say, but something inside him was pulling him in that direction. When he reached her, he saw that she was standing in front of the Christmas tree at the entrance, her eyes fixed on the golden ornaments, as if looking for some meaning in the repetition of that ritual. She turned slowly, her eyes still moist, and asked, "Was it you?" He just nodded. She didn't scream, she didn't cry, she didn't smile. He just whispered, "Why?" And in that moment, he realized that it wasn't just about the present. It was about everything. About all the years of silences, about the conversations that never happened, about the mutual judgments, about the loneliness masked as sarcasm. Jake took a deep breath. He said he didn't know exactly why he did that. He just felt that he needed it. That there was something in that gesture that he himself could not explain. But that, for some reason, her father's name seemed the only one that should be on that card. It was as if the book had been bought by his hands, not Jake's. And that, as strange as it seemed, maybe it wasn't just a memory, but a reconnection, a chance to reframe the pain and turn Christmas into something worthwhile again. Rachel listened to everything in silence. And for the first time, he did not respond with irony. He didn't even make a joke. There was something different in his eyes. An old tiredness, but also an unexpected opening. As if that painful memory, delivered so delicately, had dissolved a thick layer of ice that had protected his heart for years. She didn't thank him, but he didn't need to. The way he held the book said it all. It was as if she hugged herself. As if the gift had reconnected the woman she was to the girl who was still waiting for her father at the foot of the tree. Back in the room, everyone continued with their laughter, toasts, and songs. No one noticed their absence, nor the subtle change in Rachel's energy. She came back, sat down next to Jake, and said nothing more. But it stayed. And that simple act, that of staying, said more than any conversation. The Christmas that had begun with a mocking smile now took on a new color. Something was silently transformed. And next to her, Jake felt there was something more to come. Something that perhaps involved the whole family, and not just the two of them. That night, when everyone went to sleep, Rachel left the book on the living room table, right next to an old family photo. It was a faded image, taken on a Christmas decades ago, where she still smiled innocently, sitting on her father's lap. Jake, seeing that in the morning, understood that the story did not end there. On the contrary, it was just the beginning of a truth that needed to be told, of a past that was ready to be brought to light. And he had no idea that the present had awakened more than memories. It had awakened an urgency. Because sometimes life gives us signs, and it's up to us to decide whether to ignore them or accept them as invitations to heal. Jake had made the first move, but what would come next was totally out of his control. Because deep down, that card hid more than a memory. He was hiding a secret. And the name written there, it was just the beginning. On the morning of the 25th, while the house was still asleep under the weight of supper and veiled emotions, Jake woke up earlier than usual. The sun had barely touched the roofs, and the frost of the previous night still bordered the glass with winter designs. He walked through the house in silence, as if he were being guided by something that even he could not explain. The footsteps led him to the hallway that led to the attic, a space everyone avoided. Up there were boxes, old furniture and memories accumulated from generations. But there was also something Jake never had the courage to explore. The past of the family he'd married into but never really belonged to. He climbed the steps carefully, feeling each plank creak beneath his feet as if the house whispered ancient secrets. When she opened the door and turned on the dim light hanging from the ceiling, she smelled dust, mold, and time. It was like entering a forgotten chapter of a book that no one else wanted to read. The boxes were stacked in random order, some with faded labels, others covered by cloths. And it was under an old closet that he saw something different, a wooden box, locked with a rusty lock. On it was a hand-carved engraving, J.R., the initials of Rachel's father. The lock gave way easily to the touch of a key that was hanging from a nearby nail, as if it had been left there on purpose. Inside the box, neatly stacked and tied with a faded red ribbon, were more than 20 letters, all handwritten, dated between 1995 and 2017. Jake sat down on the cold floor and began to read the first one. It was a letter from John to Rachel, written the day after the last Christmas they spoke. The handwriting was identical to that of the card he had reproduced, because he had unknowingly used such a letter as a model to imitate the handwriting. And now, he was facing the origin of everything. The letters spoke of longing, regret, apologies that were never sent. John said he didn't know how to fix what had broken between them, but he wrote anyway, as if he could somehow be forgiven on paper. There were passages in which he blamed himself for having been too harsh, others in which he said that Rachel was more like him than she imagined. And there was one letter in particular that brought something completely unexpected. A direct mention of Jake. John said that he saw in him a good man, but lost, and that he wanted him to take care of Rachel, even if she didn't know it. Jake felt a shiver run down his spine. That changed everything. Not only because of the unexpected connection with John, but because it showed that there was a silent plot unfolding between them for years, and he had no idea. The letters were never delivered. Probably because, after John's death, Rachel kept them without the courage to open them. Or maybe because her mother, still alive at the time, thought it best to hide it. The fact is that those words were there, intact, like time capsules waiting for the right moment to emerge. And the Christmas present had been the trigger. With trembling hands, Jake picked up the cards and slowly descended. It was still early, the house remained silent. But deep down, he knew the storm was just beginning. Not a storm of screaming or fighting, but one of pent-up emotions. And he had to decide, would he tell Rachel? Would he deliver the letters? Or would he let silence continue to govern what had been built out of fear? It was a difficult but inevitable choice. Because, at that moment, he was no longer just an observer. He was part of history. And perhaps he was the only one capable of rewriting it. When she arrived in the kitchen, she found Rachel having breakfast alone. The book was on the table, next to the cell phone. She looked at him, but said nothing. He just pointed to the chair next to him, as if inviting without demanding explanations. Jake sat down with the wooden box on his lap and just said, "I need to show you something." Rachel, who had already cried alone during the night, just nodded. And when he opened the lid and showed the letters, she put her hand to her mouth. For a moment, time stopped. The memories, the smells, the sounds of the past, it all came back with overwhelming force. She took the first letter gently. He read it in silence, and he began to cry. But it was a different cry, not of pain, but of reunion. Jake respected the moment. He said nothing. He let her father's words do what he could never do with advice or gifts. Rachel looked at him teary-eyed and said, "Did you find that today?" He nodded. And then she did something Jake never expected. She got up, went to him, and hugged him. A real, deep hug, full of forgiveness, gratitude, and something new that arose between them: trust. But what they didn't know was that one of the letters contained a secret that would change not only how they felt about each other, but their entire family history. And it hadn't even been opened yet. Rachel spent the rest of the morning reading letter by letter with a delicacy that mixed reverence and pain. Her father's words, although distant, touched places that she thought had already healed. Jake, silently, remained nearby. He knew that this was not the time to speak. It was the time to listen, even if in silence. And it was when Rachel reached the last letter, separated from the others by a blue ribbon, that the mood changed. As he unrolled the paper, he realized that it had no date. It was incomplete, as if it had been interrupted in the middle. But the content, it was devastating. The letter began like the others, with an attempt to get closer. But soon it took an unexpected turn. Rachel's father, John, wrote that he needed to tell something he had hidden for many years, something that could change the way she saw the whole family. He said that, during a difficult phase of his marriage, he had a brief involvement with another woman, and that from this relationship, a boy was born. A boy he never had the courage to assume publicly. A boy who grew up far away, without knowing the truth. The mother's name was not written, but the child's name did: Jake. Rachel froze. The paper trembled between his fingers. His eyes scanned the sentence several times, as if waiting for the words to change. But they were there, clear, firm, and suddenly it all made sense. The silent empathy that his father had for Jake. The words in the letter that said he saw in him a good man, but lost. The desire for him to take care of Rachel. The handwriting of the card. The emotional reaction to the present. Everything fell into place like pieces of a puzzle that she didn't even know she was putting together. But the final piece, it was there, and she didn't know what to do with it. Jake saw the change in her face before he even heard any words. She looked at him as if seeing someone for the first time. There was no anger in her eyes, but there was no comfort either. There was confusion, unbelief, and a pang of pain. Rachel held out the letter to him, without saying a word. Jake read it, twice, 3. He felt his heart racing, his breathing failing. Everything he knew about himself. He was being challenged by a few lines written on an aged paper. He didn't know if he believed it. I didn't know if I wanted to believe it. But, deep down, a part of him already knew. All his life, Jake had felt out of place. As if it didn't completely belong anywhere. Raised by a single mother, without much explanation about his father, he learned not to ask. To accept emptiness as part of life. But that letter offered more than answers. It offered an identity, an origin, and at the same time, it messed up all the certainties he had. Because now, he wasn't just Rachel's brother-in-law. It was possibly his half-brother. And that changed everything, including what he felt, or thought he felt. Rachel stood up slowly. He walked around the room in small circles, as if trying to rearrange the ideas inside his own mind. And then, he stopped in front of the window. He looked at the snow-covered garden, as if looking for a way out, an explanation, or simply a little air. Jake sat there, his hands on his knees, his gaze lost between the fireplace and the letter on the table. Neither of them knew what to say. because there were no words ready for that. It was the kind of revelation that can't be answered with logic, only with time. The silence lasted for minutes that seemed like hours, until Rachel, still with her back turned, asked, "Did you know?" Jake shook his head. "I had no idea." She turned slowly, her face serious but without hatred. "That changes a lot, Jake." He nodded. "I know, but I don't know what." She walked over to him and picked up the letter again. "Maybe it changes who we are, or maybe it just reveals what has always been here." He looked at her, not knowing how to answer, because everything they had built, the difficult relationship, the crossed looks, the silences, now gained a new meaning and a new urgency. And then, as if the words had a life of their own, Rachel said, "I think we need to talk to my mother. If anyone knows the truth, it's her." Jake agreed, and in that moment, they understood that Christmas dinner had not been the end of a reconciliation, but the beginning of a much deeper journey. One that would require courage, listening, forgiveness, and maybe a new chance to build a family in the most unexpected way possible. The afternoon fell with a strange weight on the house. The winter light, yellowish and cold, invaded the windows with a melancholy slowness. Rachel and Jake had gone for hours without exchanging many words, but the silence between them was now different, no longer of estrangement, but of preparation. Rachel's mother, Margaret, lived just 3 blocks away, in a one-story house that she herself made a point of keeping exactly as it was in the 80s. Floral wallpaper, black and white photos, the smell of lavender, and creaking furniture. When they decided to go there, they knew it wouldn't be just any visit. They were going in search of a missing piece of the puzzle, and deep down, they both feared what they would find. Margaret received them with the usual restrained kindness. She was an elegant woman, one of those who carry pain with posture, as if it were impolite to show weakness. They sat down in the living room, and after the initial greetings, the mood changed. Rachel was direct. "Mom, we found some letters from Dad in the attic." Margaret widened her eyes for a brief moment, but soon composed her expression. "Ah, letters. What kind of letters?" Jake remained silent, letting Rachel lead. She replied firmly, "Letters to me, which he never sent. And one of them talks about you, and about Jake." For a few seconds, Margaret said nothing. His hands resting on his lap trembled discreetly. His gaze drifted to the extinguished fireplace, as if searching in imaginary flames for a way to escape from the present. "I knew that one day this would come to light," he said at last. His voice was low but firm. Rachel leaned back in her chair. "So is it true? Jake is my brother." The mother took a deep breath. Once, twice, and then he began to speak. "I said yes. That many years earlier, during a crisis in his marriage, John had an affair with a woman named Evelyn, a young, sweet nurse at a city hospital. When she became pregnant, John wanted to take over, but Margaret prevented her. Not out of jealousy, but out of fear of destroying what was left of the family. She confessed that she had known about Jake's existence forever, who followed his growth from afar, including helping Evelyn financially in secret, with checks sent anonymously. And that when Evelyn died, Jake was old enough to go it alone. "I should have told you," Margaret said, her eyes watering. "But fear paralyzed me. Fear of losing you, Rachel. Fear of facing shame. And deep down, fear of seeing John's reflection in another face." Jake, until then silent, finally spoke. "Have you ever seen me?" Margaret nodded. "More than one, but always from afar." A mother recognizes his blood even when he walks on another sidewalk. The silence that followed was heavy, dense, almost palpable. Rachel looked at her mother with teary eyes, but there was more pain than anger there. Jake, on the other hand, was in a state of suspension, as if he had entered a parallel dimension of his own life. Margaret took a small box, stored inside the living room furniture. There were some old photos, a children's bracelet with the name Jake, and newspaper clippings about school events. She had followed everything, without ever getting close. And in that silent gesture, Jake understood that, even from a distance, he had been loved by someone who never had the courage to reveal his face. Rachel got up and walked to the window. The sky was already darkening, and the first snowflakes were beginning to fall. "That changes everything, Mom. Everything I've experienced, everything I've felt, all the anger I carried." Margaret nodded. "I know, and I'm sorry." "Me too," Rachel said. "But now you can't pretend we don't know. Jake is here, and it is part of us." The phrase hung in the air like a sentence, harsh but liberating. Jake looked at her, surprised by her firmness. For the first time, she recognized him not as the stranger in the family, but as part of it, even if it meant rewriting entire memories. Before they left, Margaret hugged them, separately, but with an intensity that said everything that words could not. She asked Jake for forgiveness, tears in her eyes, and promised that, from then on, there would be no more secrets. And when they crossed the door back home, a new sensation accompanied them. It was not lightness, nor relief. It was the sweet weight of truth, the one that hurts but liberates. And yet, the night was far from over, because something still hung in the air. Something that neither the letters nor the mother had revealed. Something that was to come. Night fell over the city with a different silence. Not the usual silence of deserted streets after dinner, but a dense, almost ceremonial silence. Rachel and Jake had returned from Margaret's home with their emotions in tatters, their memories forcibly rearranged, and their past rewritten before their eyes. The house was quiet, the lights low, the smell of the Christmas tree still filling the room with that sweet and nostalgic mix of childhood, nostalgia and promise. Jake went up the stairs in silence, going to the guest room where he had left the box with the letters. He didn't know why, but something still called him back to that object. When he opened the box again, his eyes quickly scanned the letters he had already read. Each of them now looked different, as if they carried a new weight, a new meaning after their mother's confirmation. But there was something more. At the bottom of the box, hidden under the velvet lining darkened by time, he felt something hard. As he pulled carefully, he found a small digital recorder. Old, one of those with a blue LCD display and few buttons. The device was dusty but intact. Jake held it in his hands for a few seconds, as if holding something sacred, and then went downstairs. Rachel was sitting on the living room floor, next to the fireplace, hugging a cushion, his tired but attentive face. When Jake showed the tape recorder, her eyes widened. "That was my father's," he murmured. "He used it to record notes, poems, sometimes even songs he invented." "Do you think there's something in there?" Jake asked. Rachel hesitated. "There's only one way to know." Jake pressed the play button. For an instant, nothing happened. Just a faint hiss, typical of old tapes. And then, the voice emerged. Serious, paused, melancholic. It was John, and he spoke as if he were alone, talking to his own heart. "If you're listening to this, it's because I didn't have the courage to deliver those words while I was still here." The voice sounded distant, but alive, as if time had not been able to erase it. "Rachel, my daughter, my love, I made so many mistakes with you, and I never managed to fix it. But every line I wrote, every hidden letter, was an apology that I couldn't look you in the eye to make. And if there's one thing that hurts me more than my mistakes, it's knowing that you may never know how much I loved you." Rachel put her hand to her mouth, her eyes watering, her breath choke. It was the first time in years that he had heard his father's voice. And now, he spoke directly to her. Jake remained motionless. The tape recorder continued. "What about you, Jake? I know the world was cruel to hide the truth from you. I know that he grew up without answers, without a name, without a paternal face. But you are my son, and even though I didn't raise you, you carry the best in me." His courage, his sensitivity, his attentive look at the pain of others. All of this is blood, it is soul, it is legacy. His voice trembled. Forgive me, both, for having been so human, so weak, so absent. But no, you have always been with me, each one in a different way. Rachel in the heart, Jake in thoughts. The whole room seemed suspended in time. There was no more wind outside, no crackling in the fireplace, no clock ticking. Just the voice, and an energy that could not be described, as if John's spirit had crossed dimensions only to do what he never managed to do in life: unite his two children. The message continued. Don't let the pain win. Do not allow mistakes to become an inheritance. If fate gave me a son and a daughter, it is because I believe that together you could heal. Support yourself. Recognize yourself. You have each other. That's it. It's more than a lot of people have. Jake squinted tightly. A tear ran down her cheek. It was as if he had finally heard what his soul had been waiting for all his life. A name, a recognition, a place of belonging. Rachel cried silently, her hands clasped in her lap, her shoulders shaking. They were not just tears of pain, but of a reunion that transcended time. The recorder released another excerpt. The gift you once received, Rachel, may have been small, but the real gift is this moment, in which you are no longer alone, in which he is no longer lost. What have you become, brothers? The message came to an end with a dry click, but no one moved. The silence that followed was different from all the others. It was a full silence, full of meanings, closures, new beginnings. Jake looked at Rachel. She looked back. And there, without saying anything, they recognized each other not as old enemies, but as parts of the same whole. Two halves bruised by life, now united by a difficult truth, and beautiful. Rachel, after long seconds, said only, "He left it to us." Jake replied, "He believed in us, before we even believe." She held out her hand, and he held it. The gesture was simple, but loaded with everything that had been said, written, and heard. It was a quiet pact to move forward, with the past now illuminated. And although there was still much to talk about, much to rebuild, much to forgive, there was something that was already complete. The story was, at last, being told as it should be, with all voices, with all the truths, and with all the wounds exposed, not to hurt, but to heal with dignity. As snow began to cover the roof of the house and the lights flickered timidly on the Christmas tree, Rachel stood up and placed the tape recorder on the mantelpiece. He left it there as a reliquary, not as a painful memory, but as a testimony, a reminder that not all absence is abandonment, and that sometimes love does not arrive when we expect it, but when the soul is ready to listen. And even though the next step was still uncertain, they both knew one thing. Now, they were no longer alone. But just when they thought the final chapter had already been written, an unexpected knock on the door made them look at each other. Because Christmas wasn't over yet. And not all of those present had been opened. 10. In a few minutes, the room was already full. Rachel's siblings settled on the sofa. The cousins took their seats in the chairs next to the fireplace. Some stood against the walls, watching with curious eyes the strange atmosphere that hovered. It was like being inside a silent church, moments before an important sermon. There was no more Christmas atmosphere. The decorations, the lights, and even the smell of cinnamon seemed out of place in that environment now consecrated to revelation. Jake stood next to the bookshelf, tape recorder in hand, as if holding a sacred artifact about to change everything. 11. Rachel asked for attention, not with shouts, nor with beats. He just stood between the Christmas tree and the snow-covered window, with a firm but vulnerable posture. He said that the reason for the meeting was personal, intimate, and inevitable. She said that, in the last few days, she and Jake had discovered something that changed not only the story of both of them, but the story of the entire family. No one interrupted. Not a comment. Just wide eyes and restrained breaths. And then she let out the phrase that broke the ground. Jake is my brother. He is our father's son. 12. What came after was silence. Not the silence of those who did not understand, but that of those who understood everything and do not know how to process. The older brother cleared his throat. The younger cousin covered her mouth with her hands. One of the uncles got up from his chair as if to say something, but he just sat down again. Rachel continued, her hands trembling, clutching the letters. He explained about the attic, on the hidden writings, about handwriting, on the red ribbon. And when everyone was already in a state of near incredulity, she delivered the final blow. She pressed the play button. 13. John's voice filled the room. A low, familiar sound that immediately glued everyone to the chair. Confession, love, recognition. It was impossible to doubt it. There was no doubt in that tone of voice. It was not staging. It was raw truth, painful truth. Truth left in words for the day when the family's heart would be ready. And at that moment, everyone was listening not only with their ears, but with teary eyes there. Hands clasped on their knees and their lips parted as if they wanted to say no, but they already knew the yes. 14. When the recording ended, what came was not noise. It was as if the sound had disappeared from the world. Until Margaret stood up. With his slow steps, he approached Jake, put his hand on his shoulder, and said in a trembling voice, "I knew it, and I kept silent out of fear. But the truth does not die. She waits." Jake didn't answer. He didn't need to. His eyes, full of water, said more than any answer. And at that moment, there in front of everyone, the woman who once avoided him. Now he recognized him. Full body. Tornado Part 4. The reactions and the breakout of the pattern 15. Rachel's siblings reacted in different ways. One was in absolute shock, only repeating, "My God! My God!" like a mantra. Another stood up, walked up to Jake, and hugged him tightly, saying, "If he was your father, then you are one of us." And there were also those who walked away, not knowing how to cope. But no one denied it. No one screamed, because the truth was before them in such deep layers that there was no escape. Jake, even in the midst of the excitement, still felt like someone on borrowed ground. But something was beginning to change. An acceptance not declared, but felt. 16. The rest of the night was a mix of deconstruction and reconstruction. The conversations that arose afterwards were deep, sincere. For the first time in years, that family talked about the absences, the resentments, the silences they had carried since John had left. His invisible presence there, through voice, letters, and history, was so strong that it seemed that he was sitting at the head of the table. And when dessert was served, no one knew anymore if it was to celebrate the past, the present, or the future, because everything was now mixed. Fire Part 5. The final envelope 17. After the last cup of tea, as the relatives said goodbye, Jake went to the tree. He was ready. He took the envelope with his name on it and opened it. Finally, inside, there was a small key and a handwritten note. For when you're ready to know the other side of the story. On the back, an address, an unknown location for him, but with a date, December 27th, 10 a.m. Rachel approached and asked what it was. Jake just showed the roll. She read it, and her face changed. It's where he spent his summers, alone. A chalet, isolated. Almost no one knew. 18. The cold took over the house again. But now it was another kind of cold. The cold of the next step. The cold of what is to come. Jake looked at Rachel and said, "Tomorrow. Let's go there." She nodded. "I'll go with you." Margaret appeared at the door of the room. "Me too." And then, right there, without having to say it out loud, they signed a pact to continue the trail left by John, to follow until the last chapter, to close the loop with the complete truth, no matter what. Snow covered the roofs like a ceremonial cloak on that morning of December 26th. Christmas had passed, but it had left an emotional trail more intense than any winter storm. Rachel opened her eyes with difficulty, as if the night before had consumed not only her strength, but part of her identity. Still lying down, she stared at the ceiling as if it could offer her some answer about everything that had been revealed. Beside him, his father's book remained on the bedside table, closed but beating like a silent heart. The tape recorder was turned off, and the silence of the house was so deep that it seemed to scream. Jake, for his part, had spent the night awake. He tried to sleep, but every time he closed his eyes, John's voice echoed inside him like ancient thunder, charged with an unknown tenderness. It was strange to feel loved by a dead man. Stranger still was to discover, after a lifetime, that his personal history was not a straight line, but a labyrinth. He paced back and forth in the guest room, barefoot on the cold carpet, trying to understand who he was now. Son of John, Rachel's half-brother. Part of a family that, until 2 days ago, saw him as a tolerated stranger. Margaret woke up before the sun. She passed a strong tea, as she did when she was nervous, and stared out the window, her eyes fixed on the silent street. I knew that day would be definitive. The day when the truth would leave the intimate field and become collective. When the lie that he fed with silence for decades would be replaced by looks of judgment or forgiveness. She trembled, but did not let it show. She was a woman of the generation of restraint, who learned from an early age that you don't cry in public. But inside, his heart beat like a war drum. Rachel came downstairs still in her pajamas, wrapped in a thick blanket. He faced his mother with a mixture of fragility and firmness. Neither of them said good morning. They just looked at each other for a few long seconds. Jake arrived soon after, wearing sweatpants and eyes red from insomnia. When they sat down at the table, the silence between the three of them was almost sacred. Until Rachel said, "We need to call everyone. Today." Unceremoniously. Margaret nodded slowly. "I know." And he added, "But not everyone will accept this." Jake stared at the teacup as if it were a mirror. "I'm not here to be accepted. I just want to be truthful." It was then that Rachel took her cell phone out of the blanket pocket and started typing. Short but direct messages. Calling uncles, cousins, brothers. Inviting them to a reconciliation dinner. None of them knew what it was about, but they all felt that there was something urgent behind it. The first to answer readily accepted, curious. Others took their time. Some did not even respond. Margaret just watched, her fingers intertwined on the table, as if watching the trial itself being scheduled without the right to a defense. The rest of the morning was about preparation, not only of the house, but of the spirit. Rachel changed the guest bed linen, cleaned the living room floor, chose the tablecloth as if preparing an altar. Jake was in charge of reviewing the contents of the recorder once again. He wanted to make sure that his father's voice didn't fail at the most important time. Margaret arranged the bookshelf, as if arranging memory, trying to bring order to the emotional chaos that was approaching. And at the bottom of each of them, there was the same question. Are we ready for this? As the day progressed, time seemed to slow down. The clock marked the hours with exhausting slowness. The cloudy sky created a constant penumbra, as if the world was in mourning for a story about to be unearthed. Rachel went to the attic one last time. He needed to play the cards again. He reread some excerpts. I cried when he said that the greatest gift a father can give is the right of his children to recognize themselves. That sentence broke her, because she had never felt recognized either as a daughter, or as a woman, or as part of something bigger. Jake spent much of the afternoon sitting on the living room floor. He observed the Christmas tree with a new strangeness. The ornaments now felt like part of a theatrical set, where every flicker of light was a whisper of the past. It was as if the tree itself knew what was about to happen. On his lap, he held the envelope found the night before. He had not yet opened it. The name written there, Jake, in firm, undated handwriting, had made him uneasy. But he had decided he would only open after the meeting, after the truth. After the earthquake, around 6:30, the first cars began to arrive. The gate was opened. The cold wind invaded the house like an omen. The first relatives entered smiling, with wines and cakes in their hands, thinking they were going to another light get-together. But it was enough to enter the environment to feel the weight. There was no music. There was no laughter. Just a smell of burning incense and a different look on each face. Rachel greeted them with kisses on the cheek. Jake, with silent nods. Margaret with tea. In a few minutes, the room was already full. Rachel's siblings settled on the sofa. The cousins took their seats in the chairs next to the fireplace. Some stood against the walls, watching with curious eyes the strange atmosphere that hovered. It was like being inside a silent church, moments before an important sermon. There was no more Christmas atmosphere. The decorations, the lights, and even the smell of cinnamon seemed out of place in that environment now consecrated to revelation. Jake stood next to the bookshelf, tape recorder in hand, as if holding a sacred artifact about to change everything. Rachel asked for attention, not with shouts, nor with beats. He just stood between the Christmas tree and the snow-covered window, with a firm but vulnerable posture. He said that the reason for the meeting was personal, intimate, and inevitable. She said that, in the last few days, she and Jake had discovered something that changed not only the story of both of them, but the story of the entire family. No one interrupted, not a comment, just wide eyes and restrained breaths. And then she let out the phrase that broke the ground. Jake is my brother. He is our father's son. What came after was silence. Not the silence of those who did not understand, but that of those who understood everything and do not know how to process. The older brother cleared his throat. The younger cousin covered her mouth with her hands. One of the uncles got up from his chair as if to say something, but he just sat down again. Rachel continued, her hands trembling, clutching the letters. He explained about the attic, on the hidden writings, about handwriting, on the red ribbon. And when everyone was already in a state of near incredulity, she delivered the final blow. She pressed the play button. John's voice filled the room. A low, familiar sound that immediately glued everyone to the chair. Confession, love, recognition. It was impossible to doubt it. There was no doubt in that tone of voice. It was not staging. It was raw truth. Painful truth. Truth left in words for the day when the family's heart would be ready. And at that moment, everyone was listening not only with their ears, but with teary eyes, their hands clasped on their knees and their lips parted as if they wanted to say no, but they already knew the yes. When the recording ended, what came was not noise. It was as if the sound had disappeared from the world. Until Margaret stood up. With his slow steps, he approached Jake, put his hand on his shoulder, and said in a trembling voice, "I knew it, and I kept silent out of fear. But the truth does not die. She waits." Jake didn't answer. He didn't need to. His eyes, full of water, said more than any answer. And at that moment, there in front of everyone, the woman who once avoided him. Now he recognized him. Full body. Rachel's siblings reacted in different ways. One was in absolute shock, only repeating, "My God, my God," like a mantra. Another stood up, walked up to Jake, and hugged him tightly, saying, "If he was your father, then you are one of us." And there were also those who walked away, not knowing how to cope. But no one denied it. No one screamed. Because the truth was before them in such deep layers that there was no escape. Jake, even in the midst of the excitement, still felt like someone on borrowed ground. But something was beginning to change. An acceptance not declared, but felt. The rest of the night was a mix of deconstruction and reconstruction. The conversations that arose afterwards were deep, sincere. For the first time in years, that family talked about the absences, the resentments, the silences they had carried since John had left. His invisible presence there, through voice, letters, and history, was so strong that it seemed that he was sitting at the head of the table. And when dessert was served, no one knew anymore if it was to celebrate the past, the present, or the future, because everything was now mixed. After the last cup of tea, as the relatives said goodbye, Jake went to the tree. He was ready. He took the envelope with his name on it and opened it. Finally, inside, there was a small key and a handwritten note. For when you're ready to know the other side of the story. On the back, an address, an unknown location for him, but with a date, December 27th, 10 a.m. Rachel approached and asked what it was. Jake just showed the roll. She read it, and her face changed. It's where he spent his summers, alone. A chalet, isolated. Almost no one knew. The cold took over the house again. But now it was another kind of cold. The cold of the next step. The cold of what is to come. Jake looked at Rachel and said, "Tomorrow. Let's go there." She nodded. "I'll go with you." Margaret appeared at the door of the room. "Me too." And then, right there, without having to say it out loud, they signed a pact to continue the trail left by John, to follow until the last chapter, to close the loop with the complete truth, no matter what. The day dawned with a whitish sky, as if time were in suspension. The snow had stopped falling during the night, but the ground still bore the marks of a dense, silent, and meaningful winter. Jake woke up before the sun, but not out of anxiety. It was as if an inner call had pulled him from sleep. She got up calmly, washed her face in silence, and stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror as if looking at a stranger, or someone who was being born for the second time. Those eyes, which once carried doubt, were now filled with something new. Courage. Rachel also woke up early. She hadn't slept well, but, curiously, she didn't feel tired. There was in his chest a mixture of expectation, restlessness, and intuition. Something said that this trip to the cottage would be more than a visit to a forgotten place. It would be the final crossing. When he came downstairs, he found his mother, Margaret, sitting at the table with her hands around a mug of tea. No one said, "Good morning." But they didn't need to. The connection between the three souls was now made up of understood silence. There was a mission to be accomplished, and they were all ready for it. The trip to the cottage would take just over an hour. The car was fueled, the GPS configured, and the envelope with the address rested on the dashboard. Jake drove, Rachel next to him and Margaret in the back seat. The road was lined with dry snow-covered trees, and the world seemed shrouded in a fog of mystery. Nobody spoke. The sound of the engine was the only noise. But what filled the space between them was more powerful: the expectation of a final settlement. A reckoning between the past, the present, and what would come after. The cottage appeared among the trees as a secret hidden in the forest. Small, rustic, with fogged windows and a chimney from which faint smoke still came out. It was as if he were alive, waiting for their arrival. Jake parked the car slowly. They stayed a few seconds inside the vehicle, not knowing how to break that invisible barrier between discovery and acceptance. Margaret was the first to leave. He walked to the front door and ran his hand over the aged wood as if reconnecting with an old friend he never forgot. The key turned in the lock with ease. The door creaked softly, and the smell that came out of it was a mixture of damp wood, old books, and memories. It was the place where John spent his summers alone, where he wrote, where he thought, where he probably recorded his messages. The interior of the cottage was simple: a living room with an antique leather sofa, a bookshelf full of books, a fireplace lit with wood still crackling, and a round table in the corner, with a lamp lit, as if someone had just left. But no one had been there for years. Rachel was the first to cross the room. His eyes scanned the objects with emotional precision. He recognized some of his father's belongings there: the wristwatch on the table, an open black-covered notebook with notes in blue ink, and a mug with the inscription, "To the kids I love, even if they don't know it yet." Jake approached slowly. He took the notebook and leafed through it carefully. There were pages written for each of them. Reflections. Requests for forgiveness. Phrases like, One day they will meet, and when that happens, I will know that I did the right thing, even too late. Margaret sat down in the armchair by the fireplace. His teary eyes ran through the room as if recognizing every wall, every smell, every flaw in the floor. He came here to be who he really was, she said, her voice low. Far from expectations, away from the charges. It was here that he dreamed that one day the two of you would look at each other with compassion, not judgment. Rachel knelt next to her mother, held her hand. And today, he succeeded. Jake approached, the notebook still in hand. But one last thing is missing. At the end of the notebook, there was a hand-drawn map. A small symbol indicated something hidden under the planks of the shelf. Rachel got up, walked there, and noticed that one of the shelves was looser. Together, they pushed the furniture and found a metal handle. When they pulled, they revealed a secret compartment embedded in the floor. Inside was a dark wooden box, locked with a padlock. Jake opened it with the same key as the envelope. And there, inside it, was what no one expected, a video, a small external hard drive. Next to it, a letter. This is the last gift. If they have come this far, it is because they are ready. Watch it together. And remember, the truth is not meant to hurt. It's to liberate. The cottage had an old notebook on the desk. Jake plugged in the hard drive, turned on the device, and the video started playing. It was John, in video, sitting right where Margaret was now. He looked at the camera with eyes heavy with time, but with a calm that filled the entire room. If you're seeing this, it means you've finally reached where I never managed to take you in life. He smiled, but it was a sad smile. I failed at many things, but I never stopped loving you. Rachel, you have always been my light, my strength, my mirror. Jake, you are my greatest absence, and my biggest regret. But now you have each other. That's it. This can be the new beginning. Margaret covered her mouth. Rachel held back her tears. Jake didn't blink. The image was like a mirror of the soul. It was like having John there, among them, for the last time. The video continued. John talked about the past, about guilt, about the fear of disintegrating the family. He told how he loved Evelyn, Jake's mother, but also how he loved Margaret, in a different but true way. He told how he tried to gather the courage to reveal everything, but time always seemed to run away. Until he realized that his mission was not to pick up the pieces, it was to prepare the way for his own children to do it. And now, looking at the video, that's exactly what happened. They were there, gathered, wounded, yes, but whole for the first time. John then revealed something else. He had left instructions at the cottage for the place to become a permanent meeting place. A place where the new family, this family finally united, could come back to whenever they wanted to remember who they really were. A place where the truth would always be welcome. And at the end he said something that none of them would forget. If pain has divided us, may love rebuild us. Because blood unites, but choice strengthens. With these words, the screen went black, and the cottage was absolutely silent. None of them moved for minutes. It was as if time had stopped in reverence for the last message of that man who had failed so much, but who, in the end, had left a legacy of reconnection. Margaret was the first to speak. I've never met this John. Jake looked at her softly. And I never thought I'd have the right to meet you. Rachel stood up, still with her eyes full, and said, but we know him now, in the truest way. And he brought us together, in the most human way. Jake took the box from the hard drive and kept it in his pocket. He looked around the cottage. It was simple, imperfect, but now, it was home. Rachel lit more wood in the fireplace. Margaret poured water for tea. And there, without saying anything, the three of them sat side by side, in silence. Each one immersed in their own memories, their own regrets, their own healings. The fire danced in the fireplace as if celebrating something invisible. And for the first time in years, there was no tension between them. There was presence. There was forgiveness. As the flames warmed the room, Rachel took a blank sheet of paper from John's notebook and wrote something on top. Letter for next Christmas. Smiled. I was creating a new tradition. A new way to keep the Father's presence alive, without it becoming a burden. Jake walked over, picked up another sheet, and started writing as well. Margaret watched in silence. And then he asked for a pen. Everyone wrote. Everyone allowed themselves to leave there, in that place, words that one day could also heal others. Words that transform. Words that are no longer lost in the attic. And so, as the snow fell again outside, silent and beautiful as a belated blessing, they wrote. Not to close the story, but to ensure that the next chapter was written with more love, more presence, more truth. Because when love is written by hand, he never gets lost again. Evening came slowly, tinting the sky with golden hues that reflected through the windows of the cottage with an almost symbolic beauty. Outside, the white of the snow now shone with the soft light of the setting sun, as if the entire universe knew that something had been healed that day. Rachel closed the curtain slowly, not to hide the world, but to mark the moment. The night that was approaching was not one of mourning, but of peace. A peace unlike any they had ever felt, the one that comes after the storm, when everything has been said, cried, understood. Jake collected the letters they had read and carefully stored them inside the same box where the photos and notes were. He ran his hand over the wooden lid and closed his eyes for a moment. That simple gesture carried more than organization. It was a ritual. It was like closing a chapter without erasing what had been written. Margaret watched everything in silence, as if finally allowing her children to assume the role of conductors of their own history. She had kept the secrets for so long that now the simple act of observing in silence was already liberating. After the simple dinner they had prepared together, they sat down again in front of the fireplace. The fire burned softly, constantly, mesmerizing. Rachel began to tell childhood stories that she didn't even remember well. Small details, sensations, phrases spoken by John in almost prophetic tones. Jake, little by little, found gaps to fill with his own trajectory. Moments when he felt the absence of his father without knowing that he was the one he missed. Margaret, her voice breaking, recalled the beginning of the marriage, the promises made and not kept, the trials, the mistakes and the silences that, until then, seemed to protect her, but in fact kept her away from everything. For hours, what happened in that room was more than a conversation. It was a collective confession, each one peeling away layers of pain, shame and doubt. Not to expose the wounds, but to let them breathe. Rachel confessed that, for a long time, she hated her father in silence, even though she missed her. Jake admitted that he was ashamed that he didn't have a story to tell when asked about his family. Margaret said she spent years waking up in the middle of the night afraid that someone would find out, and, even more, afraid that no one would ever know. Time flowed without them noticing. There was no more cell phone, watch, appointments. The cottage had become a refuge where the outside world no longer mattered. What mattered now was what was there. The three of them brought together by a truth that, although painful, was alive, organic, and redemptive. John's absence didn't hurt like it used to. It was not a hole, but a different presence. Felt in the words he left, in the space he built, and in the bridges he built even after he left. Jake stood up and walked to the door. He opened it slowly. The cold air came in as a reminder that life goes on. He took a deep breath, as if taking the world in a single gulp. He turned inward and said, "We don't need to hide anymore. Not here, not anywhere." Rachel nodded. Margaret stood up and walked over to him. The three of them, side by side, stared at the snow and the silence of the forest with a sense of awe. It was like watching the reconstruction of one's own origin with one's feet firmly on the ground and a clean heart. Then they decided to write a collective letter. Rachel opened a new page in John's notebook. He took a pen, looked at Jake and said, "Let's write to him." Jake nodded. Margaret approached. The letter was not a farewell. It was a thank you. It was a recognition. It was an embrace that crossed time and space. They wrote about forgiveness, about learning, about what they had discovered in each other. Each word was a brick in the foundation of something new. In the end, the three signed. A family that was reborn there, in trembling and true letters. With the letter ready, Rachel folded it and put it in the notebook, along with her father's notes. Not to hide it, but so that it would be part of that legacy. That was now a reliquary. Jake then lit one last candle and placed it on the shelf. He said that that light would be left there, on, whenever they returned. A reminder that in that place, the truth would always have a home. Margaret smiled. It was the